What you're about to see is going to make your blood boil. And I'm not talking about some staged, watered-down confrontation that WWE has been feeding us for years. I'm talking about the kind of raw, unfiltered chaos that reminds you why you fell in love with professional wrestling in the first place. Last night on Monday Night Raw, CM Punk and Bron Breakker didn't just have a confrontation. They had a collision that felt like it ripped through the fabric of everything we thought we knew about modern WWE. And here's what's going to make you furious. What's going to make you want to punch a hole through your screen. This should have happened months ago. This is the confrontation that WWE has been deliberately keeping from us, hiding behind their safe, predictable booking while they milk every last dollar out of us before finally giving us what we've been screaming for. They knew this was money. They knew this was lightning in a bottle. And they held it back because that's what they do. They hold back greatness until they decide we've suffered enough. Let me paint you a picture of what went down, because if you blinked, if you looked away for even a second, you missed the moment that might have just changed the entire trajectory of Monday Night Raw for the next year. CM Punk was in the ring, doing what he does best, which is being the most compelling speaker in professional wrestling. He wasn't out there reading some corporate-approved script. He was out there being Phil Brooks, being the guy who walked away from this company because he was sick of the politics, sick of the favoritism, sick of watching talent get buried while the chosen few got pushed to the moon regardless of merit. And he was calling out everyone, not just the roster, not just management. He was calling out the entire system that WWE has built, this machine that chews up and spits out anybody who doesn't fit their narrow definition of what a superstar should be. Then the music hit. Bron Breakker's music, that aggressive, pounding theme that sounds like a wrecking ball smashing through concrete. And let me tell you something about Bron Breakker that the WWE universe seems to forget sometimes because they're so caught up in his lineage, so focused on the fact that he's a Steiner, that he comes from wrestling royalty. This man is not here to ride coattails. This man is not here to be the next anybody. Bron Breakker is a legitimate freak of nature, a superhuman athlete who combines the raw power of his Uncle Scott with an intensity that feels like it belongs in a cage fight, not a wrestling ring. He stormed down that ramp like a man possessed, and you could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about a storyline. This wasn't about following a script. This was about ego. This was about dominance. This was about a young lion who's tired of hearing about the legendary CM Punk and wants to prove that legends are just old men living off past glory. The moment Bron Breakker stepped between those ropes, the temperature in that arena changed. You could feel it through the television screen. The crowd went from excited to electric to absolutely unhinged. Because they knew, just like you and I knew watching from home, that something real was about to happen. CM Punk didn't back down. Why would he? This is a man who stared down The Undertaker. This is a man who went toe-to-toe with John Cena during Cena's peak. This is a man who left WWE at the height of his powers because he refused to compromise his integrity. You think he's going to be intimidated by a second-generation wrestler who's still trying to prove himself? Absolutely not. But here's where it gets interesting, and here's where you need to pay attention because this is the part that WWE doesn't want you to focus on. When these two men got face-to-face, when they were standing there in the center of that ring with nothing but bad intentions between them, something happened that you don't see very often in modern WWE. The script went out the window. You could see it in their body language. You could hear it in the way they were talking to each other. This wasn't rehearsed. This wasn't some carefully choreographed segment that had been run through 10 times at the Performance Center. This was two alpha males, two competitors who genuinely believe they're the best in the world, having a moment of real conflict. And WWE, to their credit or maybe to their horror, let it happen. CM Punk started talking about respect, about paying dues, about earning your spot. Classic veteran talking points, right? But the way he delivered it wasn't condescending. It was challenging. He was looking at Bron Breakker and seeing potential, seeing someone who could be great, but also seeing someone who thinks the path to greatness is paved with shortcuts and aggression instead of craft and psychology. Punk was essentially saying, "You're talented, kid, but you don't know what you don't know yet." And that's the kind of statement that sets off a guy like Bron Breakker, who's been hearing about his potential his entire life, who's been compared to his family members since before he even laced up a pair of boots, who's desperate to step out of those shadows and prove that he's not just good for a second-generation guy, he's good period. Bron Breakker's response was exactly what you'd expect from someone with his temperament and his chip on his shoulder. He got in Punk's face, and he made it clear that he doesn't care about CM Punk's legacy. He doesn't care about the pipe bombs or the summer of Punk or any of the moments that made Punk a legend. Because from Bron Breakker's perspective, all of that is ancient history. What matters is right now. What matters is who's the most dominant, most dangerous man on Monday Night Raw in this moment. And in his mind, that's him. Not the guy who came back after a decade away. Not the guy who's been injury-prone and inconsistent. Him. The young bull who's ready to knock the old guard off their pedestal. That's when things got physical, and let me tell you, this wasn't your typical WWE shoving match. This wasn't two guys pushing each other and then immediately getting separated by a small army of referees and producers. This was violent. Bron Breakker shoved CM Punk so hard that Punk actually stumbled backward, and you could see the switch flip in Punk's head. That look in his eyes, that cold, calculating rage that made him so dangerous during his first run with the company. He came back at Breakker with a fury, and they started brawling. Not wrestling, brawling. Throwing wild punches, grappling for position, both of them trying to get their hands on the other's throat. The crowd absolutely lost their minds. We're talking about a reaction that you don't get very often anymore, because modern WWE fans are so trained to expect certain outcomes, to see the patterns and predict what's coming next. But nobody knew where this was going. Nobody knew if this was part of the show or if these two were legitimately about to fight right there on live television. And that uncertainty, that genuine belief that anything could happen, is the magic that wrestling has been missing for far too long. That's what made the Attitude Era special. That's what made WCW's peak years so compelling. It wasn't just the violence or the cursing or the edgier content. It was the feeling that you were watching something real, something unpredictable, something that might go completely off the rails at any second. Security and officials finally rushed the ring, and it took, and I'm not exaggerating, it took at least 8 people to separate these two. CM Punk was fighting to get back to Bron Breakker even as they were pulling him away. Bron Breakker was roaring, literally roaring like a caged animal, trying to break free from the officials holding him back. The intensity was off the charts. This wasn't acting. This was the kind of real animosity that money can't buy, that you can't manufacture in a creative meeting. This was genuine conflict between two men who both believe they're the absolute best and refuse to acknowledge anyone else's claim to that throne. Now, here's where I need you to really think about what this means for the future of WWE and specifically for Monday Night Raw. Because this isn't just about one segment. This isn't just about one night of television. This is about WWE finally, understanding what we've been begging them for. We don't want choreographed, paint-by-number storylines where we know exactly how every chapter is going to play out. We don't want safe, predictable television where the biggest surprise is which part-timer is going to show up to pop a rating. We want chaos. We want unpredictability. We want moments that feel real and dangerous and completely unscripted, even if there's a loose framework behind the scenes. The confrontation between CM Punk and Bron Breakker gave us that, and it exposed something that WWE has been trying to hide for years. They have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talent. The roster right now is absolutely stacked with people who can work, who can talk, who can create compelling television if you just get out of their way and let them do it. But instead of capitalizing on that, instead of building long-term storylines that pay off in satisfying ways, WWE has spent years playing it safe, rehashing the same angles, bringing back the same legends to have the same matches we've seen a dozen times before. But last night felt different. Last night felt like someone in the back, whether it was Triple H or whoever's calling the shots now, made the decision to take the handcuffs off and let these guys actually perform. And the result was magic. The result was a segment that people are going to be talking about for weeks, maybe months. This is the kind of moment that defines careers, that creates new stars, that reminds lapsed fans why they loved wrestling in the first place. Let's talk about CM Punk for a second, because his role in this is absolutely crucial and also kind of ironic. This is a guy who made his reputation by being anti-establishment, by calling out WWE's bullshit, by positioning himself as the voice of the voiceless and the champion of everybody who felt overlooked or underutilized. He was the rebel, the punk rocker who didn't play by the rules. But now he's the establishment. He's the returning legend who's taking up television time and main event spots. He's the guy that young wrestlers like Bron Breakker need to go through to establish their own credibility. And to Punk's credit, he understands that. You can see it in the way he's working. He's not out there trying to recapture his glory days or prove that he's still got it. He's out there trying to elevate the next generation, trying to pass the torch in a way that feels organic and earned rather than forced. But here's the problem, and this is what's going to make you angry if you really think about it. WWE has a history of absolutely fumbling these torch-passing moments. They had a golden opportunity with John Cena to properly elevate a new generation of stars, and instead they had him beat everybody for a decade. They had chances to make Roman Reigns into an organic top guy, and instead they forced it down our throats until we had no choice but to accept it. They've had countless opportunities to create new main eventers, new stars who could carry the company into the future, and time again they've chickened out and gone back to the well of what's familiar and safe. So the question becomes, are they actually going to follow through with Bron Breakker? Are they going to let him be the monster that he clearly has the potential to be? Or are they going to do what they always do, which is get cold feet, start second-guessing themselves, and ultimately protect the older star at the expense of building someone new? Because make no mistake, Bron Breakker is the real deal. This isn't some pet project that's going to fizzle out in 6 months. This isn't some flash-in-the-pan performer who got over by accident. This is a legitimate superstar in the making, someone who has the look, the intensity, the athleticism, and the pedigree to be a multi-time world champion and the face of the company for the next decade. But WWE has to commit. They have to actually pull the trigger. They have to be willing to let Bron Breakker go over CM Punk in a way that matters, in a way that feels definitive and establishes him as a legitimate threat to everyone on the roster. None of this back and forth, trading wins, 50-50 booking garbage that has killed so many potential stars over the years. If they're going to do this, if they're going to use CM Punk to make Bron Breakker into a main event player, they need to do it right. They need to make it decisive. They need to make it mean something. And you know what the really frustrating part is? The fans are already there. The fans already believe in Bron Breakker. The reaction he got last night when he came out was absolutely nuclear. This isn't a situation where WWE needs to spend months trying to get people to care about someone. The people already care. They see what we all see, which is a once-in-a-generation talent who could be an absolute monster if they just book him correctly. So if WWE screws this up, if they somehow find a way to mess up something that should be foolproof, then there's no excuse. There's no justification. It's just incompetence. The beauty of this whole situation is that it writes itself. You don't need complicated storylines or convoluted twists. You have the old guard represented by CM Punk, a legend who's already accomplished everything there is to accomplish in this business, facing off against the young lion in Bron Breakker, who's hungry and vicious and ready to claim his spot at the top of the mountain. You have the natural tension between respect and dismissal, between legacy and potential, between someone who's earned their stripes over decades and someone who believes they're destined for greatness and won't let anything stand in their way. This is the kind of story that wrestling was built on. This is generational warfare. This is the passing of the torch, but only if the older generation is willing to pass it and the younger generation is strong enough to take it. And based on what we saw last night, both of these guys are ready to deliver their part of the bargain. CM Punk is clearly willing to put Bron Breakker over if it's done right, and Bron Breakker is clearly ready to seize the opportunity and run with it. But let's bring this back to that moment in the ring, because there's something else that happened that I think is really important and that a lot of people might have missed because they were so caught up in the intensity of the confrontation itself. At one point, when they were being separated, CM Punk said something to Bron Breakker that the cameras didn't quite pick up, but if you read his lips and pay attention to Breakker's reaction, it looked like Punk told him that he's not ready, that he hasn't earned this yet. And Bron Breakker's response, his immediate physical explosion toward Punk, told you everything you need to know about his mindset. This is a guy who's been told his entire life what he should be, what he needs to do, how he needs to act. And he's sick of it. He's done listening to veterans tell him to slow down, to wait his turn, to pay his dues. He wants it all right now, and he's willing to take it by force if necessary. That dynamic is absolutely fascinating because it creates a layered conflict that goes beyond just two guys who want to fight each other. This is about philosophy. This is about the old-school mentality of earning your spot through years of grinding versus the modern approach of taking what you want when you see the opportunity. Neither approach is necessarily wrong, but they're fundamentally incompatible, which means this conflict can't be resolved through words or compromise. It can only be resolved through combat, through one man definitively proving that his approach is superior to the others. And that's what's going to make the eventual match between these two absolutely incredible, assuming WWE doesn't somehow screw it up between now and then. When these two finally lock up in a sanctioned match, whether it's at a premium live event or in some kind of special attraction match on Raw, it's going to be violent. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be the kind of physical, hard-hitting contest that leaves both men battered and bloodied and fundamentally changed. Because that's what this rivalry demands. This isn't a rivalry that can be satisfied with a 15-minute TV match that ends in a distraction roll-up. This needs to be war. This needs to be a fight that people remember years from now as the moment when Bron Breakker truly arrived as a main event player. The implications of this rivalry extend beyond just these two men as well. Because if WWE does this right, if they actually follow through and build this into something special, it sends a message to the entire roster that there are opportunities here, that the glass ceiling has been shattered, that you don't need to wait for permission or approval to grab the brass ring. It tells guys like Gunther, like Damian Priest, like Dominic Mysterio, like all the young talent that WWE has been sitting on, that if you're good enough and hungry enough and willing to take the risk, you can force your way into the main event picture. And that kind of environment, that kind of competitive atmosphere, is what creates great wrestling television. Think about the best eras in wrestling history. The Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars, the Ruthless Aggression Era. What did they all have in common? They all had an atmosphere where it felt like anyone could break out at any moment, where the hierarchy was constantly being challenged, where complacency meant getting left behind. When wrestlers feel like they need to bring their absolute best every single week just to stay relevant, that's when you get the kind of television that draws millions of viewers and creates cultural moments. WWE has been coasting for too long. They've been relying on brand recognition and nostalgia and the fact that they're essentially the only game in town for mainstream wrestling in North America. But complacency breeds mediocrity, and mediocrity is exactly what we've been getting for large stretches of programming over the past several years. So to see a segment like what happened last night between CM Punk and Bron Breakker, to see that raw intensity and genuine conflict, it feels like a wake-up call. It feels like someone finally realized that they need to start delivering the kind of content that makes wrestling special. Now, I want to address something that I'm sure is going through your mind right now, especially if you're someone who's been a wrestling fan for a long time and has seen these patterns repeat over and over again. You're probably thinking that this is all well and good, that the segment was great, but that WWE is going to find some way to mess this up. They're going to overbook it. They're going to add unnecessary people to the rivalry. They're going to drag it out for too long or cut it off too soon. They're going to do something that takes what should be a simple, compelling story and turns it into a convoluted mess that satisfies nobody. And you know what? You might be right. History suggests that you probably are right. WWE has made a habit out of taking promising angles and finding innovative ways to ruin them. But here's the thing. We can't let cynicism prevent us from appreciating when something great happens. We can't let past disappointments rob us of the joy of watching a genuinely excellent wrestling segment. Yes, WWE might screw this up, but they also might not. And if they do actually follow through, if they actually give us the match and the rivalry that this setup deserves, it could be something truly special. So what do we do as fans? We make our voices heard. We let WWE know through social media, through ratings, through attendance, through every metric they care about, that this is what we want. We want intensity. We want unpredictability. We want wrestlers who feel like legitimate fighters rather than performers going through choreographed routines. We want storylines that feel real and urgent rather than just excuses to fill television time. And most importantly, we want them to pull the trigger on young talent like Bron and actually build new stars instead of relying on legends and part-timers to carry the show. The confrontation last night was just the beginning. This is the opening chapter of what could be an incredible story, one that defines both men's legacies and potentially changes the entire landscape of Monday Night Raw. CM Punk gets the opportunity to prove that his return wasn't just about ego or money, that he genuinely wants to help elevate the next generation and leave the business better than he found it. Bron Breakker gets the opportunity to step out of his family's shadow and establish himself as his own man, as a legitimate main event talent who doesn't need his last name to succeed. But it's all going to come down to execution. It's going to come down to whether WWE has the guts to go all the way with this, to let it get as violent and personal as it needs to be, to give it the time and attention it deserves instead of treating it as just another angle on just another episode of Raw. Because if they do this right, if they actually commit to making this mean something, then last night's confrontation will be remembered as the moment that changed everything. It will be the moment that sparked a new era of Monday Night Raw, an era defined by intense competition and genuine stakes and wrestlers who are willing to put everything on the line to prove they're the best. So buckle up, wrestling fans. Because based on what we saw last night, we're in for one hell of a ride. CM Punk vs. Bron Breakker isn't just a match. It's a statement. It's a philosophy clash. It's a battle for the soul of Monday Night Raw and the future of WWE. And after what we witnessed, after that brutal, intense, completely captivating confrontation, I genuinely cannot wait to see where this goes. Just please, WWE, please don't screw this up. Give us the match we deserve. Give us the rivalry we deserve. Give us the moment that makes us remember why we fell in love with professional wrestling in the first place.